The text arrived while Eleanor was folding Lila's school uniform. 3 words glowing on the screen like a cold slap. Can't come today. That was it. No, I miss you. No explanation, no call. Just a blunt, silent wall. She stared at the phone for a moment longer, then placed it face down on the kitchen counter. Outside, the sun was dipping low over Raleigh, casting golden light through the blinds, but Eleanor felt none of its warmth. Her hands, still holding the soft cotton of her daughter's pink dress, had gone still. Her husband, Derek, hadn't come home in over a month, and somehow that was starting to feel normal. He had left for Roanoke 5 weeks ago, claiming his mother, Virginia, had fallen ill and needed constant care. Eleanor, being a nurse herself, had understood. She'd even packed him a bag that night, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, "Of course, go be with her." He had nodded, kissed her forehead, and driven off with their shared car. But now she was starting to question everything about that moment, especially how he had refused to let Lila and her come along. "She's too sensitive," Derek had said. "Virginia doesn't need the stress of guests." Even then, he had been strangely forceful, and that forcefulness had turned into distance, then silence. "Mommy, look, I made this at school." Lila's excited voice brought Eleanor back. The little girl was beaming, holding up a crayon drawing of their family. 3 stick figures with big smiles, a father, a mother, and a little girl with curly brown hair in the middle. Eleanor took the paper and smiled as warmly as she could, pinning it next to the dozen others on their fridge. "It's beautiful, baby," she said, her voice just a bit too quiet. It hurt the way Lila still drew them as a unit, as if her father hadn't slowly disappeared from their lives, as if Eleanor herself wasn't holding their world together with duct tape and bedtime stories. She looked down at her daughter's expectant face, then ruffled her hair gently. "Dad's just busy helping Grandma right now, honey," she said, not believing it for a second. That evening, as the apartment grew darker and quieter, Eleanor stared at her phone again. Still no reply. She opened the last thread from Derek and scrolled up. Days of one-word answers. Busy. Later. Can't talk. There were no photos, no FaceTime, nothing but distance. She opened her contacts and tapped on Tamara's name. Her best friend since nursing school, now a fellow RN at WakeMed. Within seconds, Tamara picked up, her voice as warm and steady as ever. "You okay?" Eleanor hesitated. "I think something's going on. I mean, he hasn't called, hasn't sent a single picture. And Lila keeps asking about him. I keep telling her the same lie." There was silence on the line. Then Tamara said quietly, "Ellie, if his mother's really that sick, why keep you both away completely? And if it's so serious, why hasn't he once asked for your help? You're a nurse. You know what this sounds like." The words hit harder than Eleanor expected. She didn't want to say it out loud, but it had crossed her mind. Derek hadn't sounded like himself the last few times they spoke. Distant, guarded, like someone hiding something. "I need to know the truth," she finally said. "Not for me, but for Lila." The decision was made that night. She didn't tell Derek. Instead, she told Lila the plan the next morning over pancakes. "What if we went to visit Daddy and Grandma? A surprise trip, just us girls." Lila's eyes lit up with a kind of joy Eleanor hadn't seen in weeks. "Yes. Can I bring her the tea we made in art class?" Eleanor nodded, smiling through a knot of nerves in her stomach. By that afternoon, she had already called off her weekend shifts and packed an overnight bag. Gifts for Virginia, a brand new wristwatch Derek had bookmarked online weeks ago, and every ounce of hope she had left. The following Saturday morning, Eleanor loaded Lila into the back seat of her old Subaru and started the 3-hour drive toward Roanoke. Lila sang along softly to a cartoon playlist while Eleanor gripped the wheel and stared ahead, her jaw clenched tighter with each passing mile. The sky was clear, the trees lining the highway lush and full. To anyone else, it would look like a peaceful family road trip. But Eleanor knew better. Something in her gut told her the truth she was about to find would shatter everything. The closer they got to Roanoke, the more Eleanor's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Every familiar landmark along the way, gas stations, billboards, even the rusted green sign that welcomed them into Botetourt County, felt like echoes from a different lifetime. It had been almost a year since she last visited Derek's mother. Back then, Virginia had been pleasant enough, if not slightly distant. They'd shared awkward cups of coffee in the parlor. She had brought soup after Eleanor gave birth. Nothing overtly cruel, but never warm either. "Mom, is Grandma's house the one with the red mailbox?" Lila asked from the back seat, peering out the window. "That's right," Eleanor answered, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. "We'll be there soon." She turned off the main road and followed the GPS through winding residential streets shaded by tall oaks and maples. The neighborhood looked almost too perfect, neatly manicured lawns, porches with rocking chairs, even a lemonade stand manned by a pair of giggling kids. As they turned onto Sycamore Lane, Eleanor's stomach gave a sudden lurch. She slowed the car. Virginia's house came into view, and it didn't look like how she remembered. The last time they visited, the grass had been patchy and overgrown, leaves piled up along the driveway. Derek used to grumble about how his dad was the one who did all the yard work, and after he passed, no one had kept up with it. But now, the lawn was vibrant and trimmed. Rose bushes lined the walkway, blooming bright pink and red. The porch had hanging baskets of petunias, freshly watered. Even the gutters had been cleaned. "Wow," Lila whispered. "It's so pretty now." Eleanor parked a few houses down and sat in silence, staring. It wasn't just the garden that bothered her. It was what sat by the steps. A small red bicycle, its training wheels slightly muddy, leaned against the porch rail. The kind of bike sized perfectly for a child about 5 years old. Lila leaned forward. "Is that mine?" "No," Eleanor said quickly. "Yours is at home. Maybe a neighbor's kid left it there." But even as she said it, her voice trembled. She stared at the bike, then at the porch swing, gently swaying in the breeze. Something in her chest turned cold. This wasn't just cleaned up. This was lived in, regularly, comfortably, and not by someone dying in bed. She glanced at her rearview mirror to check her hair. She had worn her pale blue dress, the one Derek used to say made her look like the ocean. Her dark brown hair was curled slightly at the ends, makeup subtle but careful. She hadn't come here just to ask questions. She had come ready to remind her husband who his family was. "Ready to go say hi?" she asked softly. Lila nodded, still wide-eyed. As they got out, a familiar figure approached from across the street, a woman walking a little terrier on a leash. Eleanor blinked. "Miss Farrow." The woman smiled brightly. "Eleanor. Oh my goodness, it's been ages. And this must be Lila. My, how she's grown." She leaned down, tickling Lila's chin gently. "What a beauty you've become." "It's nice to see you," Eleanor said. Her throat tightened. She hadn't anticipated small talk. "How have you been?" "Oh, just fine. And Virginia's doing wonderfully, too. Saw her at the market last Thursday. She looked radiant. I told her so. Shopping with the grandkids always makes her light up." Eleanor's smile faltered. "The grandkids?" Ms. Farrow tilted her head. "Yes, the little ones Derek brought along. There's the boy, so lively. And a little girl, too, I think. Hard to keep up." They were helping pick out cereal and hugging Virginia like it was Christmas morning. Such a lovely picture. Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Oh," she said faintly. "Oh, I'm sorry, did I say something wrong?" the woman asked, suddenly aware of the shift in Eleanor's face. "No, not at all." Eleanor forced a smile. "We just didn't realize they'd be here today." "Well, tell Virginia I say hello," Ms. Farrow chirped, and continued down the street with her dog. Eleanor stood frozen for a long moment. Lila tugged at her hand. "Mom, does Dad have more kids?" Eleanor swallowed hard. We're going to find out. She pulled out her phone and typed a short text to Tamara. We're here. Something's not right. I'll call you later. The reply came instantly. Be careful. Call me the second, you know. Eleanor looked up at the house. There was soft music coming from inside, jazz faint and mellow. She stepped forward, Lila's hand firmly in hers. The air felt too still. Every instinct in her body was bracing for impact, and whatever was waiting on the other side of that door. The door wasn't locked. That was the first sign. As Eleanor stepped onto the porch, still gripping Lila's hand, she reached for the doorbell, but then stopped. The front door stood slightly ajar, just enough for warm air and muffled voices to leak out. She froze, her knuckles hovering in midair. Inside, someone laughed. Not just anyone, Derek. His voice unmistakable, deeper when relaxed, threaded with amusement. Another voice followed, a woman's. Younger, softer. Then Virginia's, laughing too. It was not the weak cough of an ill woman. It was a full-bodied laugh, light and happy. Alive. Mom, it's Daddy. Lila's eyes lit up and she stepped forward, but Eleanor instinctively held her back. Wait, she whispered. Her pulse began to throb in her ears. Something was wrong. Something was deeply, gut-twistingly wrong. She knelt beside her daughter. Let's just listen for a moment, okay? Lila nodded, her brows scrunching in confusion. Eleanor tilted her head and slowly leaned toward the open door, just enough to glimpse inside. What she saw made her stomach clench. The living room was filled with sunlight. The curtains were open wide, the hardwood floors shining. Derek sat comfortably on the couch, a glass of lemonade in hand. Next to him, nestled closely, was a woman Eleanor had never seen before. Blonde, polished, her hand resting casually on Derek's knee. He was smiling, that slow, affectionate smile Eleanor hadn't seen in months. And at their feet, a boy no older than 5 played with plastic blocks, stacking them with quiet determination. From the kitchen, Virginia emerged carrying a tray of cookies, her steps brisk, posture straight. She looked healthier than Eleanor had ever seen her. Derek, sweetheart, don't forget Ethan's nap soon, she called warmly. You too, Sabrina. Have a cookie while they're still warm. Sabrina, that was the woman's name. And the boy, Ethan, looked up and grinned. Thank you, Grandma, he chirped, his voice high and happy. He reached for a cookie and crawled onto Derek's lap. Play with me, Daddy, he said, curling against him. Daddy. Eleanor's breath caught. She staggered back half a step, heart pounding so hard she felt it in her teeth. Lila tugged at her hand again. Mom, who's that boy? She asked, her voice trembling now. Why did he call Daddy? Daddy. Eleanor couldn't answer. She couldn't speak. She crouched again, her voice barely a whisper. Stay here, baby. Don't say anything. Just stay quiet. She took out her phone with shaking hands, turned on the camera, and slowly raised it toward the open door. Inside, the scene played on like a carefully rehearsed lie. Sabrina leaned her head on Derek's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her waist without hesitation. Ethan laughed as Derek ruffled his hair. Virginia placed a napkin on Sabrina's lap like they were family. Then Virginia's voice carried across the room, sharp, clear, and cruel in its casualness. I'm so glad you finally have your real family, Derek. You should have left that woman years ago. How many times did I tell you she was never right for you? Eleanor's fingers tightened around her phone. She kept recording, forcing her hands to stay steady. Lila stood silently behind her, watching, not fully understanding but feeling everything. I know, Mom, Derek replied. I'm already speaking with a lawyer. The divorce is just a matter of paperwork now. But don't tell her anything. Not yet. She still believes I'm caring for you. Sabrina shifted nervously. What if she finds out about this? She won't, Derek said, sounding smug. Eleanor's not the type. She trusts too easily. Say the word sick and she'll back off. Eleanor blinked hard, forcing back the sting behind her eyes. Her chest burned, not with sorrow, but with fury. Then Sabrina's voice came again, softer, more hesitant. And Lila? I mean, she's your daughter. There was a pause. Derek's answer sliced clean through Eleanor's last shred of faith. She'll get custody. It's fine. I have Ethan now. One kid is enough. Eleanor stopped the recording. Her hands were trembling. Her jaw clenched so tight it hurt. She turned away from the door, her movements sharp and fast, and found Lila still standing quietly beneath the shadow of a bush, her small hands clenched into fists. Tears brimmed in her daughter's eyes. Mom, is Daddy leaving us? Eleanor crouched and pulled her into a tight embrace. No, she whispered fiercely. He already left. But we're not broken. We're still whole. Are we going to go inside? Lila asked, her voice wobbling. Eleanor shook her head. Not now. Not ever like this. She led her daughter gently back down the front steps, heart hammering, mind racing. In her pocket, the recording burned like truth. And that truth would be her weapon. The motel room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. But it was quiet, and more than anything, it was safe. Lila had cried herself to sleep hours earlier, curled into Eleanor's side on the bed, one hand still gripping the sleeve of her mother's sweater. Eleanor hadn't moved. She had simply stared at the ceiling in the dark, feeling the weight of what she'd seen pressed deeper into her chest with every passing minute. She hadn't cried. Not yet. Not when her daughter needed her steady. Not when the betrayal was still crystallizing into resolve. When the first light of dawn slipped through the dusty curtains, Eleanor sat up. She gently pulled her arm out from beneath Lila and stepped into the bathroom. Her face in the mirror looked like someone else's. Eyes red-rimmed, skin pale, but underneath there was something steel-like, something that hadn't been there before. She pulled out her phone and found Tamara's number. The call connected on the first ring. Ellie? Oh my God, what happened? Eleanor didn't waste time. I need a lawyer. One that's good with family law. And fast. Tamara didn't even pause. Camille Fletcher. She handled my cousin's custody case last year. Smart. Tough as hell. You want me to reach out? Give me the number, Eleanor said. Less than an hour later, she sat in the front seat of her car outside a law office in downtown Roanoke. The sign on the glass door read Fletcher and Associates. Inside, a woman in her mid-50s waited with a folder already open and a notepad in hand. Her hair was streaked with gray and pulled back in a low twist, her blazer crisp, her eyes direct. You must be Eleanor Hayes, Camille said. Come in. Sit. I'm listening. Eleanor placed her phone on the desk, opened the photo app, and pressed play. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The audio filled the quiet room. Derek's voice, Virginia's words, the sound of Ethan laughing in the background. Camille listened without flinching. When the clip ended, she leaned back and nodded slowly. This is enough, she said. More than enough. I want sole custody of Lila, Eleanor said. And I want to protect our assets. I don't want him taking a cent more than what's legal. Camille scribbled something down. We'll file for emergency temporary custody, then move for full primary custody once the petition's processed. Do you have access to your shared accounts? I do. I've already moved half into a new account under my name. I also brought all our financial documents, and I changed the password on Lila's medical portal. Camille looked up with an approving smile. Good. Very good. You're doing everything right. That afternoon, Eleanor drove back to Raleigh and stopped at a modest, one-story house just outside the city. Her mother, Dorothy, opened the door in an apron, eyes wide with concern. What's wrong? Eleanor, what happened? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She knelt beside Lila and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. You're going to stay with Grandma for a little while, okay? Just until I take care of a few things. Lila looked uncertain. Are we going to see Daddy? Not right now, Eleanor said gently. But it's going to be okay. I promise. Inside, Dorothy wrapped her arms around her daughter. You're scaring me, she whispered. Is he hurting you? Is he hurting Lila? No, Eleanor said quietly. Not physically. But he's tearing something apart, and I won't let him finish the job. She stayed only long enough to tuck Lila into a guest bed, kissed her on the forehead, then stepped outside again with Camille waiting in her car. Eleanor climbed in and pulled the door shut behind her like sealing a vault. Her phone buzzed. Derek. Camille gave her a look. Eleanor answered on speaker. Ellie, Derek said, his voice oddly upbeat. Just checking in. I know I've been busy. Mom's been really struggling the last few days. Eleanor kept her voice steady. I won't be home for a few days. I have a conference in Nashville. Lila's staying with my mom. Oh, a beat. Okay, that's fine. Hope it goes well. Eleanor hung up before he could say anything else. Perfect, Camille said. He's not suspicious. That gives us room to move. Eleanor nodded, staring out the window. Her fingers clutched her phone like it was a weapon. Her heart ached, but her spine stayed straight. The next time she saw Derek, she wouldn't be the one on the doorstep, begging for answers. She'd be the one bringing consequences. 2 days later, the clouds hung low over Roanoke like a weight about to break. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat of a rented black sedan, parked at the curb in front of Virginia's house. Her palms were dry now, her pulse steady, not from peace, but from focus. Camille sat beside her in a charcoal suit, a thick manila folder resting on her lap. Are you ready? She asked, her tone even, almost clinical. Eleanor nodded once. Yes, I've been ready since the moment he called Lila replaceable. They stepped out together. The morning air was cool and sharp. Everything on the porch looked the same as it had 2 days ago. The rose bushes, the clean welcome mat, the small red bicycle leaning against the side. But this time, Eleanor didn't hesitate. She walked up the path with purpose, Camille just behind her, her heels clicking softly against the stone. She didn't bother to knock gently. She rapped 3 times, sharp and firm. The door opened after a few seconds. Derek stood there, his hair tousled, wearing a navy t-shirt and pajama pants. His eyes widened when he saw Eleanor. Then they flicked to Camille. What are you doing here? He asked, stepping partially outside and glancing over his shoulder. I told you this isn't a good time. Eleanor's voice was calm, almost cold. Is it because your mother is bedridden, or because Jessica and Ethan are here? The color drained from Derek's face. His lips parted, but no words came out. Camille stepped forward, extending a card. Camille Fletcher. I'm representing Mrs. Hayes in all legal matters moving forward. We're here to deliver official documents. You'll want to read them thoroughly. Inside the house, a voice called out, Derek, who is it? And then Virginia appeared behind him, wearing a light sweater and slacks, looking more lively than any sick woman had a right to. When she saw Eleanor, her expression darkened. What are you doing here? She snapped. I came to return something, Eleanor said smoothly, pulling a folder from Camille's hands. These are divorce petition papers. And this, she slid out a second sheet, is a formal request for full custody of Lila. Virginia scoffed. This is outrageous. Derek, get this woman off our porch. Camille didn't move. You're mistaken, ma'am. Legally, she's entitled to deliver this in person. And I'd advise you not to interfere. Everything is being recorded. A new figure appeared. Sabrina, standing at the edge of the hallway with Ethan, clutching her leg. Her face went pale when she recognized Eleanor, and she instinctively pulled the child closer. Eleanor stepped forward slightly. I didn't come to scream or cry. I came to end this. Derek, you lied to me. You lied to our daughter. You told her you were caring for your mother, while you built a new family in the house we once helped clean after your father's funeral. Eleanor, if you just let me explain, he stammered. Explain what? Her voice didn't rise, but every word was a blade. That you called Lila a placeholder? That you said Ethan was enough? That you were waiting to finalize divorce papers without telling me, while I kept a child awake at night, wondering why her father had vanished. Camille handed over a flash drive. All of this is documented. The recordings meet all state admissibility standards. We have timestamps, voice IDs, and corroborating statements. Virginia reached for the door, her voice sharp. Get out. No, Eleanor said, looking her dead in the eyes. You've had your say for years. Your whispers in his ear. Your little judgments and condescension. I was never good enough, right? But I was good enough to raise his daughter while he ran. Camille turned to Derek. You'll be served formally again at your workplace, but as of today, you're not to remove Lila from school or Eleanor's custody. You are under temporary injunction until the hearing. Sabrina tried to speak, but Eleanor had already turned. Keep your voice down, she said softly, her back still to them. Ethan doesn't deserve to hear this mess, but neither did Lila. She walked down the steps without looking back. Camille followed, her phone already in hand, texting the next steps to the court clerk. Inside, the house had gone quiet. By the time they reached the car, Eleanor's hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from release. It's done, she said. Camille glanced sideways. No, it's just beginning. But Eleanor allowed herself, for the first time in weeks, a small breath of freedom. For once, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was hers. 3 months later, the living room of their new apartment glowed in soft pinks and golds. Pale sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, casting a gentle warmth over the scattered balloons, open presents, and half-eaten birthday cake. Lila's laughter rang out as she spun in circles across the hardwood floor, her new dress billowing like butterfly wings. Mom, look. Isn't my room so pretty? She called, breathless with joy. It's the best ever. Eleanor leaned against the doorframe, a cup of tea in her hands, watching her daughter dance. The walls of the little room were painted Lila's favorite color, rose quartz, with stick-on stars lining the ceiling and a view that overlooked a small community park. It wasn't big, it wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs, and after everything, that was enough. The divorce had finalized faster than Eleanor expected. Camille had moved like lightning, carving out financial protection, enforcing custody orders, and securing half of the shared assets. Derek had tried to contest at first, but the recordings had spoken louder than any excuse he could manufacture. In the end, he signed the papers. He didn't even ask to see Lila. Eleanor had transferred hospitals shortly after, accepting a promotion at Durham General. The schedule was better, the pay was better, and more importantly, it gave her space to start over without the shadow of what had been. Dorothy had helped with the move, unpacking boxes and labeling cabinets while humming old folk songs in the kitchen. Eleanor's sister, Rachel, came every weekend, taking Lila to movies and walks in the park so Eleanor could rest. Tamara had driven in from Raleigh that very morning, arms full of takeout and wrapped gifts, declaring that birthdays were sacred and non-negotiable. By early evening, the apartment was filled with the comforting buzz of people who cared. Friends, family, not all bound by blood, but every one of them real. Eleanor sat on the couch, plate in hand, surrounded by low chatter, music, and the hum of laughter that didn't feel forced. Lila blew out the candles in one breath and beamed as everyone clapped. "Best birthday ever," she whispered, eyes shining. Outside the window, a silver sedan pulled up quietly along the curb. Derek stepped out, shoulders hunched, his posture hesitant. He didn't approach the building, just stood on the sidewalk, looking up. He looked older, more worn. His hair was messier than she remembered, clothes wrinkled, shoes scuffed. He held nothing in his hands, Jessica had left him 2 weeks after Eleanor served the papers. Camille's team had uncovered another affair, this time with a coworker. When Sabrina found out, she took Ethan and left the same day. Virginia had collapsed shortly after and had finally been admitted to a long-term care facility. With no one left in that Roanoke house, Derek had begun calling Eleanor, first in texts, then voicemails, each one a little more desperate. She never responded. Now he stood there just watching. From her place by the window, Eleanor met his gaze for only a second, and then she looked away, not out of fear, not out of pity, but because he no longer mattered. Inside, Lila threw herself into her mother's arms. "Thank you, Mom. This was the best day ever." Eleanor kissed the top of her daughter's head and held her tight. "You deserve every bit of it." She looked around, the plates on the counter, the photo of her and Lila on the fridge, the drawing Lila had made of the two of them standing under a tree. And she realized something she hadn't dared believe until now. They weren't rebuilding. They had already built something new. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were done, Eleanor tucked Lila into bed. The little girl looked up, sleepy but smiling. "Mom, are we going to be okay forever?" Eleanor smoothed the blanket around her. "We're going to be better than okay. But what about Daddy?" Eleanor paused, then sat beside her. "Sweetheart, family isn't just who shares your name. It's who shows up, who stays, who listens. And I promise you, we have more family now than we ever had before." Lila closed her eyes, satisfied. Eleanor sat for a moment longer, watching her breathe, the steady rhythm of peace. Then she stepped out onto the small balcony, the cool night air brushing against her face. Down on the street, Derek's car was gone. Eleanor stood there in the quiet, a cup of tea warming her hands, her heart light for the first time in months. She hadn't just survived. She had chosen herself, and that was the beginning of everything.